So, for some odd reason, Larry Joe Bird of all players, the second best small forward of all time, a top 10 player in NBA history, is having his name drove through the mud by ESPN yet again. And I do find it, of all the players, all the times you could do this. To downplay Larry Bird now in 2023, it's pretty great timing. As Jokic this year just averaged 30, 14, and 10, won the championship, and the year prior Luka Doncic made the West Finals while being a walking 30-piece. Now, nevertheless, my jaw almost hit the floor when I heard this take from Stephen A. Smith saying Jason Tatum, yes, Jason Tatum is better than Larry Bird for 46 out of the 48 minutes. Don't believe it? Listen for yourself.
Well, who would you rather have, Larry Bird or Jason Tatum?
Well, the answer to that was the
Larry
same
Bird.
thing that people used to ask me about LeBron James or Larry Bird. I used to be like this: LeBron James for the first 46 minutes, give me Bird for the last 2.
So you're saying
And
you
that's
want
got to
Jason?
do with heart. That's what I'm trying to communicate.
But shooting ability too.
You're
It's
saying
like-
that you have Jason Tatum for the first 46. I know you said LeBron, but you're using that same equation with Jason Tatum for the first 46
Larry
minutes
Bird.
for Larry Bird.
No, what kind of question? Larry Bird was clutch. Larry
Okay.
Bird was clutch.
But I'm talking about you don't want him for the whole game?
No. I'm saying for me, not Larry Bird for the whole game. No,
Oh, come on. You
That's
say,
what he's saying.
You're basically saying you take Tatum over Larry Bird.
for the first 46 minutes.
Oh, no, come
Okay,
on.
let me
come
ask you.
on.
Now, stopping it right there, Stephen A. Smith's logic, it's pretty idiotic. As taking Tatum over Bird for 46 to 48 minutes, it baffles my mind. And I don't know how any self-respecting NBA fan who has watched numerous eras like Stephen A. Smith can have this take. And if you're saying Tatum is better than Bird for all but 2 minutes, you're basically saying Tatum is a better overall player and a top 10 player in NBA history. And comparing both Tatum and Bird as individual players, Larry Joe Bird clears him fairly easily. As scoring the basketball, he's a better scorer, he's more efficient, better rebounder, much better passer, higher basketball IQ, 10 times more clutch, and by far a better shooter. The only thing Tatum has Bird on is things like vertical, speed, quickness, and defense very slightly. But with that being said, back in the 80s, we saw guys like Dominique Wilkins, Dr. J, guys who were better athletes get outplayed and beat by Bird all the time. And Bird, despite his flaws on defense, his shortcomings as an athlete, impact-wise, was so much more impactful than Jason Tatum. As for Tatum's career, you gotta be honest. He came into a Boston team that a year prior was in the Eastern Conference Finals, compared to Larry Bird, who went to a Celtics team that had missed the playoffs for 2 straight years. And the year before him went 29 and 53, his second worst record in the NBA. Larry Bird, as a rookie going to that team, instantly made them a championship contender and led them to 61 wins. And looking at their roster, their only major addition was Pete Maravich, who was over the hill and only played half the season. Besides that, the Celtics team, primarily the starters, a lot of the bench players, were the exact same team. And going one step further, Boston before Bird was 19th in defensive rating and 19th in offensive rating. The next year with Bird, instantly were top 5 in both those categories, and once again, a championship contender. And look, I don't hate Jason Tatum, but for these conversations at only 25, to get Larry Bird comparisons and be called better than Bird, it's way out of bounds. As looking at Tatum this year in the playoffs, he was fantastic in some games, and other games was a shell of himself. The word to describe Tatum is erratic. One night, he's shooting 60%, and the next night, 16%. And looking at Game 7 versus Miami, the biggest game of the season, yes, Tatum in this game got injured. For the rest of the game, he was not impactful in the slightest. Compared to someone like Bird, the cream of the crop, one of the best players of all time, after hurting his back in '85, the following year with a broken back, bad knees, really bad everything, he had one of the greatest seasons in NBA history. As in '86, he won MVP his third straight. His team only lost 15 games all year, one of those being at home. He was a three-point champ, free throw percentage leader, top 10 in points, rebounds, assists, and steals, while leading his Boston team in all said categories. And looking at the playoffs, he elevated his play to just historic levels, averaging 26 points, 9 boards, 8 assists on ridiculous 52, 41, and 93 splits. His Boston team went 15-3 en route to the championship. If you look through NBA history, 86 Bird till this date is the only player all time to average 25 points per game on 54-90 splits and win the championship. And once again, he was doing that on a broken back. Things like that, seasons like that, separate the great ones from the all-time great ones.
Amounts. I understand that, but what I'm saying to you is Jason Tatum has had moments where he's shown up under those lights.
Not at the biggest light.
And other times he hasn't. But Game 7 is a Game 7, bro. And you go Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals, you go Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Semifinals, and you drop 51. You do that last year in the postseason, you drop 46 in the closeout Game 6, you down 3-2, you go on the road to Milwaukee, and you drop 46 against Giannis. That stuff matters. What I'm saying to you, however, is that if you show up sometimes and you don't show up other times, you just don't have it. It's not a matter of heart.
So, stopping it right there, once again, how can a guy who's over 50 have these takes about Larry Bird and Jason Tatum? As even Stephen A. Smith acknowledges, Tatum at age 25 is erratic. And like I said, from night to night, you don't know which version you're getting of Jason Tatum. And speaking of those big-time games, Game 7 Larry Bird is rarely if ever talked about. But when he was healthy, minus his last Game 792, where his shell of himself, prime Larry Bird in Game 7s was virtually unstoppable, averaging 29.1 points, 9.9 boards, 7.1 assists on 49, 44, and 95 splits. In those 7 games, the Celtics went 6-1. For the all-time great players, being consistent is a big theme. And for Larry Joe Bird at his prime, he was always consistent and always showed up in the big-time games. And looking at his second championship run, that being in '84, for 19 straight games, he scored above 20 points. In all of NBA history, only Jordan, LeBron, and KD have longer such streaks.
I'm going with Larry Bird. I don't care what about you. Just Larry Bird get them championships. Yeah. Larry Bird to say, "Look, I'm better than you. I'm gonna play you."
Larry Bird was
with my left hand.
Larry Bird was sensational
tonight.
Yeah. Larry Bird was sensational, right. But I do think that at times he was a defensive liability. And so what I'm saying to you is that I know what he can do, but physically he would elevate himself in pressure moments. He couldn't sustain it physically over the course of 48 minutes.
So Stephen A. Smith right here obviously hasn't done his homework and hasn't brushed up on 1980s basketball, as saying Larry Bird for an entire 48-minute game, quote unquote, couldn't sustain himself is an abysmal take. As looking at Larry Joe Bird, in all of NBA history for minutes per game, he ranks third all time at exactly 42.0. The two guys he's ahead of are Michael Jordan and LeBron James, and the two guys ahead of him are Russ and Wilt. And going even more in depth, looking at Larry Bird's 3 championship runs, for those seasons, he played 243 out of 246 games. For the modern NBA, that's virtually unheard of if you're not Mikal Bridges. And looking at his minutes average, in 81, averaged 44.1, 84, 41.8, and in 86, 42.8. Unlike Jason Tatum, Larry Bird can handle high volume minutes and deep playoff runs while being injured. And the last thing I do want to touch on is Stephen A. Smith saying Larry Bird is a quote-unquote defensive liability. As if you know basketball history, that's far from accurate. No Larry Bird, he wasn't Scottie Pippen guarding 1 through 4, being a menace at all times in the court. But if you watch his games, his basketball IQ, he was a very smart defender, mainly guarding 3s, 4s, and 5s, and getting the passing lanes of any action in the paint or on the perimeter. And many forget Larry Bird, before his injuries, was second team all-defense numerous times. Yes, Tatum is a more athletic defender and a better defender in general, but Larry Bird's overall defense at this point is actually kind of underrated. Again, he wasn't Scottie Pippen, but on the flip side, he wasn't some stiff and a liability to his Boston Celtics teams. So that right there is the end of the video. Once again, an ESPN host with a god-awful take that's just inaccurate, false, and just all over the place. As always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.